technical issues throughout the presentation, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the Zoom presentation. This will be the only way that you can get information over to a member of our team, and we'll be able to assist you. The Q&A feature is available to ask any questions that you may have. We'll address all questions and comments during our Q&A period. If you're also interested in a live Spanish translation, please press the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen and select the Spanish option. And as you just heard, this meeting will also be recorded. We are offering the live interpretation in Spanish during this meeting, and basically that's just going to have my voiceover of the presentation that you see in front of you, and you won't be able to hear the English version. So if you do need it, go ahead and raise your hand to let us know that you would like that available to you, and we'll check in throughout our progress to see if anyone needs it as well.
All right, thank you, Janine. So far, so good. Okay, so our agenda this evening is pretty straightforward. We just covered housekeeping. We'd like to walk through the project background and purpose, spend some time talking about what is a specific plan, what does it do exactly, what should we expect out of this. We would like to provide a pretty deep overview of the downtown specific plan draft that's been made available. We want to make sure that you understand and are comfortable with how to comment on that plan and share your input with us. And then finally, we have an open forum at the end for questions and answers. All of the input that we receive, as you've probably seen so far, will be rolled forward with our draft to the Planning Commission and City Council so that the feedback of our community is provided to the decision makers on this. That's an important tenet for us. And with that, we'll go ahead to project background. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I think, one of the biggest questions out in the community that I've heard is why now? And anybody in Moorpark for the last period of time, probably 8 years or more, has really seen a resurgence of investment, both development and new businesses coming online within the downtown. The council has also made some pretty strategic decisions, both approving projects such as High Street Depot on the top, but also doing things like banning chain stores on High Street. So our community has provided some direction to us that's resonated recently, and the Downtown Specific Plan is a great document that can kind of help consolidate some of the community vision for our downtown and channel that investment and future investment in the direction that our community expects. The other element in play here is that in 2023, the city completed a 3-year effort, the Moorpark 2050 General Plan. And while that provides a context for community vision, priorities, and strategic planning for the development of our city globally, a lot of effort and attention was also placed downtown. So the specific plan that we have today, prior to this draft, is a 1998 document. And I think collectively, we have some concerns in the community that may not be the vision that is expressed in the general plan or currently. So there is a desire on our part to kind of true that up with our residents and just make sure that we are aligned in what our expectations are. And then finally, the time element, the last time the specific plan was significantly updated was 1998. Obviously, and the city has changed a lot since then. So it's important to assess that still and make sure that those thoughts are relevant. Next slide, please. So this actually gives you an example of some of the prioritization for our downtown that came out of our work on the 2050 general plan over those 3 years. We have very specific policies and guidelines that are put forward to revitalize the downtown, a thriving downtown that's cherished by residents, that helps define the popular image of Moorpark. So really tourism, driving things, activity. Conservation and open space, unique historical and cultural character, preserve that, protect that. There's also elements of our agrarian history that tie back to the downtown. So our community has shared these very passionate comments with us as it relates to our downtown. And I think it really behooves us now to take an opportunity like this downtown specific plan to ensure that those are really enmeshed in the development and kind of placemaking character expectations that we have for this portion of our community. The other thing is, The general plan guidelines for downtown have also been used and found themselves in other planning efforts. You may remember a few years ago we approved a economic development strategic plan that had a whole section focused on downtown strategies for economic development and advancement that are pretty important as well. So while the downtown specific plan has a very critical role here with respect to land development, this also leverages other plans adjacent to it and ensures that our actions are coordinated and in sync with one another. Next slide, please. Uh, Also, this slide kind of illustrates some visual reasons of why it's time for an update. On the left-hand side, you'll see the black and white 1998 specific plan, and on the right-hand side, our draft of the new specific plan. So what you may notice here is that there's a situation not just of old versus new, and a need to reassess those values, but also some of the way that this information is presented. The reality is, as I'm sure Alan with Placeworks will highlight, is that planning has evolved as a profession and we can do things with more clarity, transparency, and frankly, better effect now than we could in 1998. An example of that is the little diagram on the right, which is referred to as a form-based code. So you can see how you have little keynotes about building separations, the spacing or sizing of particular building elements. All of those things can come together and much more effectively create that downtown landscape versus the more traditional land use requirements in the 1998 plan. And then as a practitioner of planning, I'll tell you that one of my pet peeves is the fact that the 1998 plan makes a lot of statements with words like should and suggestions, but I think what the development community and our community would benefit from is just kind of clear statements about what we would like to see and expect to see, more shalls versus shoulds. Next slide, please. Oh, could you go back one? Thank you. So what is a specific plan? As I've kind of outlined, this is a planning document that implements the goals and policies of the general plan. It also sets the distribution, location, and extent of land uses within the planning area. It's kind of like a zoning code if you're familiar with that. Also, the standards and criteria that new development will be considered by. We're talking a little bit about permit streamlining as part of this and just making sure that the decision authority for land uses, development is kind of structured in a way that makes sense and isn't overly burdensome. We're also looking at the location and intensity of public infrastructure, such as transportation and utilities. All these things come together and help leverage what's going on in the downtown. So we kind of look at it holistically in that way. And then finally, implementation measures to accomplish the items noted above. And again, reaching back to that community vision that's espoused in our general plan. All of these things kind of trickle down from that. It's all strategically guiding up towards that. What is a specific plan not doing? This is not a development project or proposal. You will see some ideas in the specific plan about things like gateway signage, parks, feature developments. While those can be catalysts for achieving the vision and the place that we're describing in our plan, they're aspiring ideas. They're not actually proposed as part of this effort. It's just something that we can look to in the future should we choose to. And finally, the specific plan is not enabling the approval of any building, development, or project directly. Again, this is the context that will accommodate that in the future. Next slide, please. So what do we mean when we say downtown in Moorpark? There's a lot of talk about High Street, but our downtown area actually extends quite beyond that. You'll see the map here. It goes up Walnut Canyon, kind of dances along Everett Street, goes west of the post office by the new Vendor Gardens project. It extends south to LA Avenue on Moorpark Road. That's an important mixed-use corridor that we're looking at, and that includes the Birkinshaw House. And then also there's a portion on Spring Road that encompasses the Veterans Park, the Police Services Station, and the Ruben Castro Center. So downtown has some different nodes, with the core being High Street, and obviously a lot of significant residential areas as well besides downtown proper. We are recommending the removal of some areas that had historically been in the 1998 plan. Those are shown in blue. And the reason that we're doing that is their lack of integration really into the downtown or even as a gateway in that way. So you'll see that in the plan as well. Uh, Next slide, please. This is a general schedule of our project and kind of where we are in the process. You'll see the blue line represents public engagement, and this is actually our last outreach event. However, public engagement will extend all the way through a decision by the city council here. And if you're here this evening because you've gotten one of our email blasts or you've been checking out our project website, we'll continue to provide ways that you can input and provide your opinion on this plan through the process. That really this needs to be reflective of our community. So your input all the way through the end is very important to us. The last thing is that we are planning for a planning commission meeting later this spring, and then moving quickly to the city council in the summer. So this is moving quite quickly, but again, we're going to take as much time as we need to thoughtfully digest the ideas and direction that we're receiving. And next slide, please. And as an example of those ideas, how was this draft created? So when we were working on our general plan, our slogan was made by Moorpark, and we've taken the same approach here. This is our third public workshop. We've had 59 total attendees, excluding those on the call tonight. The first workshop was focused on findings and visioning, kind of getting the big picture, vision, destination, goal items identified. And then we moved into concept evaluation. So kind of testing different things. What types of buildings do you prefer, A or B? Almost like getting your eyes checked at the optometrist, kind of case testing things to validate the direction that we would go with our planning. And then tonight we're discussing the draft plan, the result of those efforts kind of leading to this. The survey that we circulated, we received 71 submissions and 202 written comments. I mentioned the preferences, so 178 responses there. The long and the short of it is we've had some quantitative and qualitative feedback that's been provided. Moorpark's a tight community, so we've talked to a number of people just off the cuff out in the town, and all of that input we hope is reflected in this plan. And we're at the point where we've drafted it. We're asking you to help us validate that. So that's enough of a teaser, I think. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Alan Loomis with PlaceWorks. He is our planning and placemaking expert that hopefully has brought life to your input. I'll turn it over to Alan now. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Doug, and good evening to all. Um, I'm going to do a kind of high-level overview of the specific plan draft that's available online tonight, and not going to kind of do a deep dive into any of the details, but just kind of broad strokes, kind of what you can find in each of the different components of the plan. As you can see on the screen, and if you've opened a document, you'll see that it's divided into six different chapters. I'm going to cover what each one of those chapters generally addresses and what kind of information you can find there, and invite you at the end to kind of read through it carefully and provide any kind of detailed written comments through the online portal. Um, so with that, I'll sort of jump in and kind of start with chapter one. Chapter one is an introduction, covers, why we're doing a specific plan, what it is, the context for it. In a sense, it provides in writing all the information that Doug just conveyed at the beginning of his presentation. It's all that information is documented in writing. And for tonight's purposes, I'm not going to go through all that again. But like I said, it's the why and the where of what the specific plan is and its purpose. Chapter two, we call Downtown Today, and this provides a series of X-ray viewpoints of downtown as it exists at the end of 2025, beginning of 2026. It's not intended to be an exhaustive and encyclopedic survey of downtown's existing conditions. Rather, what it is a look at the kind of the circumstances and the conditions of downtown as it exists today that are the most relevant to crafting its future. And so just to highlight a few of those here, one is just, the nature of how downtown is kind of already has existing character areas of High Street, Moorpark, the residential neighborhoods on Charles and Everett Street, for example. Those are kind of fixed character areas that we have to work with as we think about the future of the downtown. And another key component is the kind of scale and footprint of existing new development, namely the High Street Depot, as well as the ownership of land. As it turns out, a decent amount of the land that is really kind of you would look at and say that's really kind of the prime development site, is actually owned by the city or another public agency, which means that in many ways, the future of downtown can really be decided by or with the city as a kind of major partner and decision maker, and not it's purely left up to developers. Although there are plenty of sites where developers and small entrepreneurs can invest in the downtown. So these are the kind of relevant issues that we tried to highlight as we kind of think about the future of downtown, and that's captured here in chapter 2. Chapter 3 is a documentation of the public outreach process and feedback that we've gone through. Again, Doug has hit on some of the details of this, and so that information again is documented in the plan in chapter 3. There is a blank page or two in the plan that is a kind of placeholder for the kind of feedback we will get following from tonight and following tonight's meeting as the plan is circulated in public. And as we get further public comment and a need to kind of make further adjustments to the plan, that information and that process will be documented in the plan itself under chapter 3. And as noted, as Doug noted, still to come is a hearing with the Planning Commission and the City Council that'll be scheduled in the coming months. So ultimately, the feedback from those meetings will be included in chapter 3 as a documentation of our kind of public process and discussion. Chapter 4 is, as you can see, is called the vision. And this is kind of one of the more important pieces of the draft plan. This contrasts to the existing 1998 specific plan for downtown, where the vision is, and the current plan is really just expressed in words. And in the proposed plan, we do a lot of explaining a possible vision through illustrative and aspirational drawings. So it starts with this kind of aerial view of downtown with various different possible initiatives or projects or kind of features being called out as things that the city could aspire to seeing developed. And then the plan goes through various different character areas of the downtown, one page by page, and kind of describes them in greater detail. So we start with what we call the East Gateway, and this is really the east end of High Street. Essentially from the kind of crosswalk leading to the Metrolink station out to Spring Road. So what are the possibilities for this east end of High Street in terms of new development, new infrastructure, new mini plazas or kind of placemaking components that are kind of seen here? So these images will be typical, as you'll see, really just kind of the aspirational images of kind of that represent possibilities located in the context of the existing downtown as it is today. We then moved to the West Gateway, or probably the west end of High Street, and really focused around the intersection with Moorpark Avenue. And again, a series of possibilities about what could happen as in this part of the downtown, the west end of the downtown, kind of clustered around the new library that's under construction, as well as some other kind of city-owned properties, including the parking lot in front of the post office, and some other, pieces of land, including the current Civic Center. So again, illustrative, aspirational ideas and possibilities for what could happen at this end of downtown. We do the same for Moorpark Avenue from High Street or the railroad tracks going south to Los Angeles, thinking about possible new development, streetscape improvements, street landscaping, things of those natures, sort of a suggestion of possibilities again. We then kind of shift gears a little bit. We have a kind of focused discussion on High Street itself. This is really about future placemaking components that go beyond the streetscape elements that have been recently completed on the west end of High Street. So another series of ideas, a kind of recommendation to extend that further east all the way to Spring Road. But one of the ideas we think is kind of exciting or kind of really could lend something to the downtown is the idea of stringing some kind of twinkle lights up in the historic pepper trees to celebrate that unique characteristic of High Street, downtown Moorpark, and to provide a little bit kind of additional character to the street during the nighttime and make it attractive for nighttime strollers. So various different components like that are kind of called out as we talk about High Street in particular. We have do not neglect the residential neighborhoods north of High Street focused on Charles and Everett. And the key sort of suggestion here is that we're recommending we maintain the existing neighborhood character with appropriate size, generally smaller scale development, you know, duplexes, small courtyard complexes being the appropriate size development that should occur here. Should new development occur at all. And also a suggestion that, if it becomes necessary to really manage overflow parking from downtown events, that the city might consider or explore the possibility of introducing a residential parking permit district wherein residents who live in that part of downtown would get a permit to park on the street, and everybody else would potentially have to pay or would have, time limitations as to how long you could park on the street. So really as a way of sort of encouraging visitors in the downtown for major events to focus in on the public parking lots, which then suggests parking. And that's kind of the last component of the vision that we of chapter 4 that we kind of talk about is like really what should be the city's vision or kind of approach towards managing parking in the downtown. So we map out all the public parking resources, the possibilities for new public parking lots, suggestions for, maybe doing a little bit better management of some of the existing parking resources. Um, and really sort of suggesting that, and celebrating the fact that the city is about to install some new parking wayfinding signs in the downtown as being an important step to help motorists navigate where they need to go in order to find parking resources. And the suggestion that if that demand continues to increase and there's a need for it, that the city might explore kind of some technology-based tools that would allow real-time um, kind of conveying of like how many parking spaces are available in what lot, and those could be conveyed, either at the lot itself or through kind of wayfinding signs at kind of critical key components. We think the need for that is somewhat down the road, but we want to put the suggestion out there that may be a kind of a solution the city should explore at some point in the future if parking demand really increases. Chapter 5, we call Enacting the Vision, and this is an inventory of potential projects and initiatives that the city in principle and in general um, could look at implementing as a means of really building out the vision we just described. And so there's a long list here. You can see there's 16 distinct kind of projects and initiatives that are described. Obviously, tonight I'm not going to go through all of them. I'll just highlight the two that I have on the screen, the illustrations on the screen. On the one hand, and at the east end of High Street, we have a suggestion that the city should install an archway like you see here. If you've been to San Diego's Gas Lamp District, you've seen this. If you've been to Temecula Old Town, you've seen something like this. We think this would be a really good way of announcing downtown Moorpark for motorists coming from the eastern gateway of downtown, coming from Spring Road onto High Street. Have a nice arch that goes over the city that says, or over the street that says downtown Moorpark. This would be obviously a capital project that would require the city to develop some engineering to build something in the street itself or over the street. It would be something you would actually physically see that need to budget. On the other hand, in the other end of downtown, at the parking lot in front of the post office, a parking lot that is in fact owned by the city, we suggest that, maybe the city should look at doing a Sunday farmers market. The parking lot isn't needed by the post office on Sunday when they're closed. And that's a really good location for having a kind of weekly or monthly farmers market or a seasonal market. There are different ways the city could launch that. So a farmer's market would not have a physical impact, would not leave a physical mark on the city, but would be a program of some kind that the city could kind of support and kind of continue to maintain. So the ideas of this list of 16 different things kind of run the gamut between physical projects and kind of these program initiatives. So they're all kind of described out there as really a menu of options for the city to entertain. Chapter 6 is called the Development Code, and you could think of this as really the zoning code or the rules for private development in the downtown. And it's one of the key pieces of a specific plan. And so probably about half of the specific plan in terms of page count is given over to this chapter. And so it's really fairly detailed. And I think, any architects, engineers, property owners, realtors in the downtown who have an interest in the downtown will probably want to pay attention to this fairly carefully, as will just interested citizens, because it does set the rules of the road for how private development in the downtown would occur. So there's two pieces that sort of lead off this section that are fairly administrative. One is, as you can see, there's just a kind of like step 1, 2, 3, kind of a roadmap to how to navigate this if you're unfamiliar with these kinds of processes. We also have an administrative chapter that covers all the kinds of technical, boring issues of zoning, things like who has responsibility for implementing this or kind of making decisions, um, who gets to interpret different conflicts that might arise, what happens to non-conforming uses. These are all things the zoning code typically covers, and so we do cover it here for the people who have an interest in that particular process. That's all laid out at the beginning of chapter 6. One of the key pieces of chapter 6 is that we have what we call a regulating plan. And that takes the boundaries of the specific plan area that we saw earlier that Doug described at the beginning of the presentation. And it divides the downtown into a series of different districts, or kind of sub-downtown districts. Every parcel in the downtown is assigned to one of these districts. And so you can see them color-coded on the map to the right. So this determines ultimately what district you're in, determines what your allowable uses are and the kinds of development in terms of sort of scale and size and density that you're potentially allowed to build. And so it's a kind of it's a very important map and laying everything out. Every district on that map is given a page like you see here. It's what we call a cut sheet. It's a single page that describes the intent of that district. In this case, the illustration is of High Street. And then the table is basically a checklist of all the development and design standards that one would need to kind of work their way through in order to entertain doing a development, a new use, a new building, or even a change of use, a new business within a property located within that specific district. So everything that really needs to be covered that one would need to work through is covered in this table. So as I said, it could be used as a checklist for any possible new business, new development. And so you can see in some cases the standards are expressed directly in this table. In other cases, it refers to other sections within the specific plan or elsewhere in the municipal code where the citywide standards work just fine. So the first place we go to is allowable land uses. I sort of think this is the question of, can I open a flower shop or an ice cream shop, or a doctor's office on a particular piece of property? And so there is a whole table, again, organized by the districts across the top. The different downtown districts are listed, are the columns listed at the top, and different uses are running down the side in the rows. And you can see there's different lettered codes that tell you what you can do in a particular parcel. So it's either a permitted use, an administratively permitted use, or permitted by a conditional use permit. These are all terms and permit processes that are used throughout the municipal code. So if you're familiar with zoning and the way that works citywide, this works exactly the same way. The process is all going to be the same in terms of how you go about getting a conditionally use permit for a particular use. So chapter 6 details all the possible uses that can happen throughout the downtown. And as you can see, they vary from district to district. So not every district is exactly the same. We then have a good discussion on design standards. And so this is really about the nature of like, what is the shape and form of buildings, new buildings in particular, that would be potentially constructed in the downtown. And so it's a fairly detailed chapter because we have to cover virtually every possible thing about how a building is shaped and made, from its overall scale, its roof forms, down to kind of what materials go on the exterior, and the kind of configuration of open space. So I'm not going to go through all of those different standards tonight, but I'll just highlight two that really illustrate kind of the key difference between the existing specific plan that was drafted in 1998 and what we're proposing in the draft plan. So what you see on the right-hand side is a screenshot or a snapshot of what's in the existing downtown specific plan, and this addresses the question of building modulation or massing. What you can see is it's very text heavy, and it has a lot of kind of language that says should and pretty please, as Doug sort of highlighted at the beginning. Um, Pretty ambiguous language about what's actually expected. And the illustrations, because it's an old plan that's probably been Xeroxed a few times before it was finally converted to a PDF, are not very clear. What we're proposing with the new plan is very clear illustrations and very clear standards that are going to be expressed in terms of number of feet. After 150 feet, you should modulate the width of the building, and that should be with a 5-foot inset, for example. And then the illustration of a color photograph with call outs that show like what are we talking about. In this case, it's the width of the building, as it were, as it relates to these standards. So kind of much cleaner, more kind of clarity about the standards, the expectations for design, things that can be directly measured, clean for applicants, designers, and city staff alike, as well as for the public in terms of the expectations. Another good example, still working with the same page out of the existing plan, has to do with corners. So you can see the 3 illustrations on the bottom right are these kind of very pixelated drawings, cartoon drawings of how to deal with buildings that sit at corners of 2 different streets. And again, says corner buildings should have towers or turrets or something like that. And it's a sort of suggestion, a kind of pretty please ask. In the proposed plan, we have a standard that says if you're located at a corner, you must provide 2 of the following 5 elements. And to the greatest extent possible, we're offering a menu of options, and that each of those menus should be clear about the expectation, measured with in terms of feet if possible. And as you can see, annotated on an illustrative photograph that, kind of represents a building that form that might be desired within the context of downtown Moorpark. So the design standards we've written, we think have a great deal more clarity, a great deal more simplicity than what's conveyed in the current 1998 downtown specific plan, and far more measurable. And so this is more oriented towards the overall form. That's why we call it a form-based code in contrast to kind of existing zoning practices. So that's a high-level overview of the downtown specific plan. And with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to my colleague Chad So, who is going to open up the Conveo website and kind of do a quick tutorial to show you how you can actually comment on the plan in real time as after you've had a chance to review it and really kind of digest it.
Thank you, Alan. Share my screen here. Okay. So as Alan mentioned, we're inviting the public to review and comment the plan. The plan is publicly available since I believe it was 2 weeks ago, and we asked you to review and provide comments by April 15th. And the way we're asking you to provide comments is via this website interface called Conveo. And you can scan the QR code here or visit the website at moorparkdtsp.conveo, Konveio. And so I'll give a demonstration of basically what you see when you enter the website and how to kind of navigate and provide comments. So once you enter the website for the first time, you'll see the window like this in your browser. This is on desktop. You'll start off with a summary pop-up that will basically give you an overview of the plan, again, reminding you of the due date, and then some, tips and tricks of how to use this format. There's a link here to download a PDF of the plan if you want to prefer to read it that way. A note to attend the workshop today, and then a link towards the project website, which is linked to the city's website for more information. So to start off, to actually see the plan, there's 2 ways. You can click hide to hide the summary, or down at the bottom, you can click on full document. You can, if you want to refer back to those notes, you can go back to summary to bring back that pop-up. Now, start at the beginning here. And then so the first sort of how to navigate is with this navigation bar at the top of the book screen. So the first icon is if you want to see it in full screen. Your next option is to jump to certain pages. There's a up and down buttons, or if you want to jump to a specific page, you can enter the number there. The next icon will allow you to download the same PDF, same link as in the offered in the summary. And then if you want to search for a certain topic or word, you can type it in the search. So if I want to say, for example, I want to search Alan just mentioned design standards, I'll type in design standards and it'll start to jump towards the next word it's mentioned in the PDF. And then to jump to the next, words mentioned, the little hover will tell you to click on this to find the next occurrence of the phrase. And it'll start to jump through the document of where the search language you entered is in. The next sort of options here is your kind of buttons to comment, select, or drag. It's defaulted at comment, which I'll go over in a second, but select if for somebody need to select text, and then drag again to click and drag to navigate to the throughout the document. Now to comment, we're going to go back and make sure we're under the comment feature. And all you have to do is, as you're reading through, if you're ready to comment, you can click on the area that you want to comment on. So let's say I want to comment on this development code section here. I'll click there. When you click your first comment, it will ask you for your name and email. This is for our purposes to kind of track who's commenting. So I'm just going to type in my email here, and then I'll type in test comment. I have read, and again, this is only for the first time you enter your comment. Then you click post comment, and then your comment's posted and done. And then you can cancel, and then you can move on and add another comment as you wish. And again, it's no longer going to ask you for your name. Your name is now saved, and then you can just move forward to add as many comments as you like. There's some other features here. Over in the top right, there's these kind of chat bubble icons. The bottom icon, if you'll notice in this example, sometimes you'll comment on some text and it will kind of block the text. You can click the bottom icon to kind of move it over to the side. And if you click it again, it will kind of revert back to its original location so you can see where that comment was pointing to. And then again, to revert to the side. And then in this sort of interface, you can see the other people's comments. So if I click that first button, you get a full list of what other people have commented on. You can click on a comment to see where that comment existed. To go back, you'll click view all. Alternatively, you can click on one of these little yellow icons with the number on it, and it'll jump to that comment. Once you're there, you can read the comment and decide if you want to thumbs up it to support it, thumbs down, or reply and add to that comment. And then to go back, I'm going to go to view all, and then I can click cancel, and then return to my normal interface. Down at the bottom right, there's a zoom in feature and zoom out. In case you want to zoom into certain content, and then a fit width to kind of go back to your default zoom. And then again at the bottom right, there's some language alternatives. Now these are sort of provided by automated translation if needed, so it may not translate everything, but there's an option there. So I think that's the general overview of how to comment using this platform, the Conveyo platform. And every time you put in a comment, it's automatically saved. You don't have to do 5 and then press save or anything. Every comment is saved automatically as you go. So you don't have to worry about that. So yeah, I will now pass it back to Doug to close us out and take us to Q&A.
Thank you very much, Chad. And I'm hopeful that you'll see through the Convio app that the intention here was really to try to create a virtual dialogue to understand where there was consensus among the feedback that we're receiving in order to be able to respond to those changes and inform the council members and decision makers about the the degree of affirmation behind what we've heard. Looking ahead, the next steps are this Convio website will remain open through April 15th to receive feedback. We're also planning to have a meeting of the Community and Economic Development Committee on April 15th. What we will do at that meeting is we will share the draft specific plan as it currently exists. If we have the ability to include some of the feedback we've received or begin to characterize that, we'll do that. But occasionally, the deadlines for getting an agenda out might make that a little difficult. Looking forward, though, the Planning Commission and City Council hearings in the summer will include the plan plus that feedback or a revised plan that incorporates that feedback. And we will keep you updated through the project website that you can scan here. Also, the periodic emails that have gone out before in advance of major events. Next slide, please. Before I have a thank you slide at the bottom. I'd actually like to jump to that now, but I wanted to thank each of you for being here and taking time out of your evening to help understand the plan in more detail. I'm very hopeful that we'll see your feedback reflected, and frankly, we would welcome our community's engagement in this. We're not very good at doing this in a vacuum, so your feedback is really what drives us. I'd also like to thank our colleagues at PlaceWorks, and finally, the Southern California Association of Governments has completely sponsored this effort with a $250,000 grant. So this is money coming from HCD, a state department, offsetting costs to your local government in order to enable something like this. So we're very appreciative of that stewardship and support as well. And with that, I'd welcome any questions that you guys have. If you'd like to raise your hand, I think I recognize most of the names on the attendees list, so I think I can trust to unmute you. If you feel more comfortable typing your question into the box, our team here will be happy to walk through those together. Okay, I think we're good so far. If you're typing a question, if you could raise your hand, we'll wait for you. Okay, looks like we have one coming, so we'll stand by. And again, there should be a Q&A button at the bottom of your toolbar where you can enter that in. Okay, so the first question we received, is there a plan about the train horns after 10 and before 6? Yes, kind of. So the downtown specific plan is not getting into the train horn issue. However, the city has separately been discussing something called a quiet zone, which is a designation that we could proceed with after a study is conducted to demonstrate that certain safety features are in place. The city council will be considering a proposal to proceed with the quiet zone at a future meeting on their agenda. What we've done previously is submit a request for proposals to solicit for a firm to prepare that for us. But to answer your question, yes, there is an interest that's been expressed in pursuing that and seeing if we can kind of lessen the honking moving through the High Street station. The second question, is there a way that we can add more density to the downtown zone for housing? And Alan, I'm wondering if you would like to respond to that one.
Yeah, thank you. There's certainly as a prerogative or kind of a possibility that the planning commission or the city council could recommend increasing the current allowed densities of the downtown. The kind of a planning hang up on doing that is that the densities that the downtown specific plan has drafted are working with are those that were defined during the general plan process. So that entire process looked at the densities across the entire city and evaluated, through an environmental impact report, the distribution of all those densities. So as long as we live within the general plan densities prescribed for the downtown, which is what we're doing, we're living within the envelope of that original environmental impact report. It's only a few years old. So if we were to increase densities in the downtown, then we'd have to revisit that whole environmental process, which adds a considerable amount of time, analysis, and expense to the process that at the moment our scope doesn't include. I will say that as a kind of asterisk onto that. But that being said, with the various kind of provisions that the state has provided for development that includes affordable housing, there is usually an option for density involving affordable housing to be able to exceed the kind of baseline densities that are prescribed anywhere within any city zoning code.
Thank you, Alan. And jumping back to the question on train horns, I've added a link in the chat to a survey that the city's put out. I understand that there's still some time to complete that, but basically we're wondering what the public's thoughts are on whether the train horns are an issue and whether you would like to see us pursue the quiet zone. So if you haven't already, please fill that out. Anybody else, feel free to jump in. You're very welcome. All right. Well, with that, we sincerely, oh, no, we got a question. How would you determine density for a new downtown hotel? Thank you for the question. So a hotel isn't typically looked at from a density standpoint because it's viewed as a commercial use. And what we would look at is just traditional setbacks, building massing, and form requirements as it relates to the hotel, as opposed to a number of rooms. However, there may be a parking requirement that's put in place. That parking requirement may or may not be superseded by state law, and those things may have an indirect effect of kind of driving what the number of rooms would be within a hotel downtown. But hotels are kind of unique things, and often there's some requests that those developers come into the city with that's considered as part of a development agreement. So I would suspect that if a special project came along and the council would like to maybe negotiate something, that would be something that we could look at as part of a development agreement. But hopefully that addresses your question.
Yeah, I'll also note that the downtown districts where hotels would be permitted are also subject or regulated by FAR, or floor area ratio, which is essentially total square footage versus as a ratio of the square footage of the lot. That gives you a total kind of footprint for a building, and a hotel developer or architect would simply have to determine how many residential or how many hotel rooms plus amenities they could fit within that floor area ratio limit that's determined through the tables of the downtown.
And as an additional note, our council has expressed kind of an appetite for buildings up to but not exceeding 3 stories downtown. So I think that would have an effect as well. And I think that translates into the recommendations in our specific plan. Another question, has there been any study done for a parking structure downtown? Could one allow for new commercial construction in the area and to not require on-site parking requirements as they exist? That's a good question. The closest thing that I can turn back to is a parking study that was occurring around the time that High Street Depot was being approved back in 2019. That study looked at available parking on city streets and I believe public parking lots within the area. The findings of that study was that the utilization rate was very low on peak demand. or at peak times at that time. So typically, when you start talking about parking structures or paid parking in downtowns, you're looking for utilization around 95 or 90% to kind of warrant taking that step forward. And I at that time, the utilization was much, much lower. I want to say something like 60%, but it's been a little while. We understand that the landscape has changed downtown as well. We have new development. The High Street Depot project did remove some public parking that had been provided and added some additional visitors and demand. So I think that's something that we're going to have to look at continually over the years to assess what our public parking strategy is going to be within the downtown. Public parking, in short, should be shared. To your question about whether public parking facilities can kind of offset parking on individual projects, I think the answer is yes, that's the intention. You'll see a lot of shopping centers do that, and we would like to apply the same model to our downtown. Most of the lots downtown for development are very small and narrow, so it's not really in our interest or feasible to require each lot to develop its own parking on site. We would prefer to see those parking lots be more consolidated in kind of key locations rather than spread out across a variety of small lots. So that's some insight behind the strategy. But no, I haven't heard anything regarding a parking structure imminently. Have another question regarding the vacancy rate on the new buildings. Feel free to clarify for me, but I'm assuming this is High Street Depot. That just started leasing up relatively recently. So I believe it's a private development. The city's not involved in the leasing, but I believe there's about 25 units or so that have been leased, residential units. The commercial units downstairs are still in the leasing process. Those kind of were made available after the residential, and there's still some work that would need to be done in those spaces to make them ready for business before opening to the public. So that's kind of an evolving situation. I can't really put my finger on where they are, but it's still on the onboarding phase. And if there's nothing else, I guess I'll add that, again, my name is Doug Spondello. I'm your Community Development Director. My contact information is at the bottom of the downtown website. Please reach out to me, give me a call, come in and chat. I'm happy to kind of take a deep dive into some of these topics related to the downtown. Rich, I see you still have your hand up. If you do have another question, feel free to type it in. But otherwise, yeah, I appreciate each of your perspectives, and collectively, I think we realize that this resurgence of interest in High Street has kind of an evolving effect, and one of the things that we are looking at and sensitive to is parking, based on what we've heard and seen there. All right. Well, at that point, thank you again, and thanks to my colleagues. Looking forward to seeing you at one of our upcoming meetings, and enjoy your time in the document. Have a good night.